สวัสดีค่ะ There are now more international news broadcasters as well as social media for the viewers to choose from. And as one of the largest broadcasters in the world, the BBC has to adapt to this changing landscape. Director of the BBC World Service, Peter Horrocks, shares his viewpoints. Peter, you've been in the news business for over 20 years. How has news reporting today changed from the past?
I think the most important thing that's changed has been the internet, which has made a massive difference to the way that journalism works in two ways. The source of news, the range of information that we have from the public, from many different news channels and different kinds of information around the world, and then of course the way that people receive their news. The fact that the internet can be used to distribute news to people's computers and increasingly to people's mobile phones, and of course people now sharing the news through social media, through Twitter and Facebook. All of these changes are revolutionising the way that news works.
How's the BBC adapting to all these changes?
We are adapting, but of course you have to move very, very fast to keep up with the speed of change.
Right.
So for instance, almost 10 years ago, we set up what we called a user-generated content hub, a team of people whose job was to keep an eye on what was happening. We didn't call it social media then, but in terms of what people were posting on the internet, and to make sure that that information was assessed and checked and then usable by BBC journalists. That investment has really paid off. So for instance, with the Arab Spring, with what's been happening in Egypt and Syria, we have a team of people who are keeping an eye on all of that information, checking it, processing it, and then making it part of the overall package of news that the BBC provides.
Are people watching BBC more on the internet today or still on TV?
There are still more people that watch us on television. So for instance, BBC World News, our 24-hour television channel, has about 70 million people watching it. About 30 million people come to the BBC on the internet. So television is still larger, but online is growing very, very fast.
Who is our main audience today for television news?
For the BBC, it's anyone in the world who's interested in the world. That's not necessarily just people who are in business or in politics. It's anyone who wants to understand how the world is changing. So it could be a teacher, it could be a farmer. It's people who are curious about the world and want to understand how their lives are being changed by what's happening in other countries.
Are these people more of the older generation? Because young people tend to watch more on the internet.
I don't think it's necessarily about an older generation. I think generally people who are interested in the world around them tend to be young, actually. The internet maybe skews a little bit younger than television, but our television audience is a relatively young one, as is our online audience.
Now, the social media, is that a threat to television itself?
I wouldn't see it as a threat. It's certainly a challenge. It's certainly a different way of thinking about how news gets to people. But social media can be very complementary to television. So we have a number of discussion programmes. World Have Your Say on BBC Radio and on BBC World News is a programme where our audiences around the world can get in touch with the BBC, give their views, give information which the BBC might not otherwise have. And that's a very useful thing to be able to do, to have a channel of communication with your audience as part of your conventional broadcasting.
Are we, television, are we a dying breed?
I don't think so. I think television is dramatic. I think especially television news. I think that live television watching is clearly changing. People are watching more recorded programmes, they're time shifting, they're choosing programmes on demand. But one of the things about a news channel is that things are happening at that moment. If you want to be informed about the news, you need to be watching it live. So the internet is a fantastic complement to that. It goes alongside it very well, but I don't see television news dying.
How tough is news competition today on the global stage? I see many new international stations popping up around the world.
Well, one of the things that's happening is a huge investment that's being put into international broadcasting by countries like China and Russia and Iran, who are trying to influence the world by producing their own international news stations. So RT, Russia Today from Russia, for instance, or CCTV from China. And very large amounts of money are being put into it. However, we think that audiences so far are not watching those services very much because people generally don't trust those sources because they can see that they are biased. They're being created in order to give a positive view of the countries that are paying for them. The BBC comes from Britain, but it doesn't give a British point of view.
Really?
It's about an impartial view of the world. We cover things about British soccer, football, and we cover aspects of life in Britain, but we don't have the British government's point of view. We have an independent and impartial point of view, and we believe that's what's created the trust in the BBC over the many years that it's been in existence.
But isn't it part of BBC's maybe duty as well to project a good image of the UK?
No, it's not. If the British government has done something controversial, for instance, in the war in Iraq, the BBC covered that and criticised it or covered criticisms of it as much as we would of any other country. It's absolutely vital that audiences around the world know that we will treat Britain as fairly as we treat any other country.
How do you build credibility in your service?
You do that for years and years. It's no good me just saying it. We need to show on air every day that we've earned the trust of audiences by being impartial, by being fair at all times with all the stories that we cover.
But is there such thing as impartiality in news reporting? Because all reporters, we do have our own opinions and point of views, and the way we are brought up, it shapes the way we think of the world. That's very normal.
I think that's a very good point. So we always say that impartiality is something that you aim for, but you should never say, I have achieved full impartiality. But you should always be ready to have your view challenged by someone else's perspective and do everything you can to leave your opinions, your personal opinions, at the door when you come into work each day.
You do have your own controversies as well from time to time.
Yes.
Is it very difficult to gain back public trust and do damage control?
If you lose it, if you make a mistake,
right?
If there's a controversy, then trust can fall, and we've seen that occasionally. But trust in the BBC is at very, very high levels. We measure trust compared to our competitors, and in most markets in the world, the BBC is trust more than other international broadcasters, and often more than local national broadcasters. It's something which we keep a close eye on, and trust is the most important thing that we have.
Maybe you have been around longer than other people, that's why you gain this trust?
Yes, and I'm not saying that other people can't be trusted. There are different kinds of trust, and people sometimes trust organisations in different ways. Some audiences want news that reflects their opinions, and they may well trust that. But we're for people who want to have an independent, impartial, objective view of the world, and who want to have their perspective on the world challenged rather than just being confirmed.